Yoink. All right, everybody in class and at home, we are on page, I just want to make sure I get it right. So page 19. I introduced you. So with teaching, the art of teaching, you introduce concepts, you develop those concepts, and you master those concepts. And so today, hopefully, we get developed our planes and axes. This is so important because when we get into specific joint motions in the body, there's going to be some confusion there. Remember, we don't live in robot world. Not every motion is going to be these kind of introductory motions. There's going to be motions that are going to be really difficult to see. And so the foundation of planes and axes is how we can differentiate and know what joint motions are happening because we understand the planes and the axes about which they're happening. Okay. One of the confusions about planes and axes is that in your books or on previous materials, all you see is a two-dimensional picture. They try to make it into 3 dimensions, but there's no movement there for spin, so it's really hard. So let's take a look at the first one, sagittal plane. And I'm sure you guys may have been introduced to sagittal plane splits your body into right and left halves. But my elbow can move in a sagittal plane, and that has nothing to do with about splitting my body into right and left halves. And in addition, what I have up on the board is to try to help me make my point today. And that is, if you start at the top of that sagittal plane and you take a point and you run it through in a dimension, a straight line dimension, let's say the Z. Well, to make it look like a plane, you actually have to take that Z and then drop it down the Y to give it a two-dimensional view. So is it Z or is it Y? For instance, if I take this chair and I slide it, I move it linearly, right? And I said, what plane was that motion in? Some of you might say frontal. And some of you might say transverse. So think about it. It's moving with the front board, but it's also moving with the floor. If I've shifted the chair forward, some of you might say sagittal. Some of you also may say transverse. Both of you have a valid point because any straight line motion is in a combination of 2 slices in space. Does that make sense? It calls back to something I was trying to tell you guys about joint motions, that we can't say flexion of the elbow is when the arm goes forward, because forward and up, and then all of a sudden up and back. We can't do linearity because there's combinational things with linear. But what we can do is define planes for what they are. Planes and axes, planes and axes, planes and axes. And with that axis, this is my case. I'm in court. I'm trying to make my case. Anytime you invoke an axis, that is our proof that something has to spin. It's the whole point about having an axis, right? An axle for a car is for the tires to spin. So we cannot look at planes linearly. We have to look at planes angularly or rotationally, because now there's always going to be just one answer. It's not how the chair shifts. It's how does the chair spin. Now there's no ambiguity. There's no combination. The chair is spinning sagittally. The chair is spinning frontally. The chair is spinning transversely. Campbell, why in the world would the chair spin? Fair enough. How is the skateboard moving? Well, it's going parallel to the floor. Transverse? Oh, it's also going parallel to the wall. Frontal? We can't look at things shifting or sliding or being linear in a plane. How is the skateboard spinning? Frontal plane. about an anterior posterior axis. How are the tires spinning? Frontal plane, about an anterior posterior axis. How are the tires spinning now? Sagittal plane, about a bilateral axis. How about the tires spinning now? The wheels, transverse plane, about a polar axis. Does that make sense? So anytime we talk planes and axes, it's about spin. It's about rotation. Now, here's where your mind wants to play tricks on you. If we're doing some kind of functional task, I used this last week, a jab or a free throw. Our brains want to see the translation part of that happening. It's like my hand is the skateboard. And our brains want to say, how is the skateboard moving? What plane is the skateboard moving? But the skateboard is only moving because the wheels are allowing it to move. So we need to not look at the skateboard. We need to look at the wheels. So if I did something like this, I'm exaggerating for planes and axes so that we don't use combinational stuff. I don't want to look at the shift. I want to look at how did my elbow rotate. In this case, transverse plane, about a polar axis. You guys see that? How did my shoulder rotate? In this case, mostly transverse plane, about a polar axis. Of course, I could do it a lot of different ways. But I need you to not look at the shifts. I need you to look at the spins. Here's another practical example. Only the best analogies in class, right? So I have a piece of tape, and I put L for lateral, the outside, right? And I put an M for medial, inside. These are the two sides of my knee. It makes sense that a bilateral axis would run from the side to side of my knee, okay? What I need to recondition our brains, and look, me as well, is to not look at a squat as my knee joint proper going up and down. Because again, if something's going up and down, how can we identify a plane? If it's going up and down, you might say, oh, well, that's frontal. But I might say, well, why wouldn't that be sagittal? But what I can't say is my knee is rotating about its bilateral axis. That's how the wheel is spinning. Does that make sense? Now that gives me one answer. That's my knee's sagittal plane, because the rotation is happening about my knee's bilateral axis. Because this is the outside of my knee and this is the inside of my knee. No matter if I'm here, outside, inside, bilateral, or I'm here, inside, outside, bilateral. This is still the sides of my knee. We have to recondition our brains to not look linearly. We rotate to translate. So we have to look at things from the rotation standpoint. And then if you want to describe the so what effects of the distal segments, knock yourself out. Going down on the squat, coming up on the squat, that's fine. But what we can't say is going down on the squat is frontal plane. We analyze things joint by joint. What is the knee doing? What is the hip doing? What is the elbow doing? And all of these things are happening with the distraction of distal segments that might be moving in straight lines because we had joints rotating them to do so. Once again, for the jab, sorry, I'm excited about Bucky's coming to left here. For the jab, my hand goes forward because at the same time my elbow's trying to spin it down into my left, my shoulder's trying to spin it up into my right. Those two things cancel out angularly and summate linearly. But it doesn't change the fact that I had rotation at the elbow and rotation at the shoulder. but our brains only want to see this. I think I gave the analogy, and I'm going to get off of this dead horse. I think I gave the analogy in sports, soccer, softball, football, you name it. It's more common for people to just want to watch the ball and not see the things that are happening behind the scenes. As human movement professionals, we have to see what's happening behind the scenes so that we can help people, truly help them, because they may be doing a functional task and we need to have our metaphorical x-ray vision to say, what are the knees doing? What are the hips doing? Or that form looks off. Maybe it's not because they're not listening to me. You got to keep your elbow in. You got to keep your knee. What if their body isn't allowing them to do that? And you have to figure out why. Classic example. My coach used to ride my rear end because my elbow would be out when I shot. He was an old school coach. Ryan, keep your elbow in, cookie jar, that stuff. Coach, I'm trying. I hear you. I'm trying. And so now all of a sudden I was being a bad, I wasn't listening. Enter grad school, and I'm like, oh, I know why I couldn't keep my elbow in. My external rotation is awful. I have no range of motion in order to do what he's asking me to do. If they would have known, it could have worked on my range of motion, and then maybe I could have done the task. Just giving you an example. Sometimes when we're working with people, they may not be able to do the task we're asking them to do. There may be a reason why. That's why this class is so important, because we can get into the kitchen. We can open up the hood and fix the car when we hear a problem. Now, when I hear a problem in my car, first thing I'm doing is say a prayer, and then I'm taking it to someone who understands cars. That's us. Someone the check engine light may come on in someone's body, and they need to take it to a biomechanic, a purveyor of human cars. That's going to be us. Okay? All right. Let's delve on. First of all, any questions or clarifications? Do we understand that we have to see spin? And some people see spin with axis, and some people see spin with plane and then go to axis. But the bottom line, this should be kind of hopefully the cherry on top. You look at those three planes, and we can't define our planes by splitting our body. You know what that means in a rotational world? If my whole body were to spin, it would be sagittal. If my whole body were to spin, it would be frontal. If my whole body were to spin, it would be transverse. But none of that shows you elbow sagittal, wrist frontal, radial ulna transverse. None of that shows you that. I'm going to show you this. Okay? Any questions before we continue to Grace? Any insight? Okay. All right, guys. Perspective. It will get easier. I promise you. But when we say global or the room's perspective, we have to have a How many of you did something this weekend? Okay, let's say you were going to meet a friend, and they invited you, to a social event, and they say, "Hey, I need help," or you say, "Hey, I need help finding where you guys are at." What's the first question they should ask you if they're trying to give you directions to meet them? What's that? Where are you at? Absolutely. And you guys know this. You guys know. Your bodies know so much information. I just need to get your brain to communicate what you already know. Where are you at? How am I going to get you to meet me if I don't know where you're at? How am I going to give you directions if I don't know where you're at? That's what anatomical position is. It's a universal, where are we at? So that now the sides of all the parts of my body make sense. My right ear, my left ear, bilateral. The outside, the inside, bilateral. the fronts and the backs, anterior, posterior. And in true anatomical position, we want our bodies and the room, wherever we're at, to see the same thing initially. Think about how cool this is. The sides of my arms line up with the sides of the room. The front of me lines up with the front of class. Now that could be face to face or it could be metaphorical. Both of our fronts are looking at the same things. Anterior, posterior class, anterior, posterior me. Top and bottom of class, top and bottom of me. It's a universal storing position. That's what anatomical is. Now, here is a logical question that hopefully will make us understand relative versus absolute. If this is the sides of my knee, the outside or lateral, the inside or medial, and it's also the sides of class. Awesome. Sagittal plane rotation of my knee about the bilateral axis. All good? Now, when I do this, is this now the front of my knee? No. Is this now the back of my knee? Is this anterior, posterior to my knee? No. This is still my lateral collateral ligament. This is still my medial collateral ligament. The side-to-side axis of my knee is still the side-to-side axis of my knee. So therefore, the rotation of my knee will still be in my knee's sagittal plane. Because the rotation is still happening about a side-to-side axis, a bilateral axis. Is that a better way of seeing relative motion? All of our joint motions are from the perspectives of the joints themselves. If I had little googly eyes, I'd have, this is the eyes of my knee looking forward. These are the ears of my knee on the side. My knee sees sagittal plane, regardless of if it's here, or there. That's important because the motions, the spin motions that we're going to call the knee, doesn't change if the knee changes global positions. Meaning, I don't say flexion and extension, but this is ab and adduction. That would be nuts. Because it's not about the room's frontal plane, it's about the knee's sagittal plane. Yes? All right. Here is the good news and the bad news. That's not bad news, it's all good news. On the test, you're going to have to know your planes and your axes. A majority of those questions are going to be from a global reference. I'm playing poker with my cards out. However, for the joints, and I'm going to tell you which joints you're going to have on the test, and they're all going to be similar. You're going to be accountable for sagittal plane motion only for the different joints I tell you. Sagittal only. Because we have to master these concepts of analyzing motion joint by joint, seeing it from the joint's perspective before we progress to more complicated joint motions. And a lot of times it's just practicing, and maybe Grace could back me up on this, it's practicing the verbiage, right? Your position, where is that joint at? The motion, where is that joint going? That specific joint. It's flexion. You don't have to answer. It's just kind of a question that I would think we would have a better way of explaining. What is flexion? We have a lot of different joints that flex, right? Our cervical vertebra can flex, our trunk can flex, our hips can flex, our knees can flex. We'll get into the two different forms at the ankle. Our wrist can flex, elbow can flex, shoulders can flex. You have a lot of different things that flex. I used to wonder, things like, well, why doesn't every joint have its own unique names of motion? And then I took this class many moons ago, and Dr. George said it so, God, he was so good at keeping things simple. What are the two positions we know? Anatomical, and there's another position that we know of. Starts with an F. Fetal. Yeah. I'm glad no one said, like, F that position or something. Although you might have been thinking at 7:30 in the morning. I get it. Fetal. Fetal position. Anatomical position. Fetal position. And all positions are is where you at. So if I'm in Lafayette, I'm at Lafayette, and I change position. Anybody here from Breaux Bridge? Okay. What about Lake Charles? Anybody from Lake Charles? Right, Shreveport? Are y'all from anywhere? I was trying to make it relevant. So let's say our starting position, our anatomical is Lafayette, Louisiana. Why? Because that's that's UL. Regardless of where you're from, we're all at the same university. That's our starting point. Where are you at? If you're going to give directions, where are you at? And let's say we go to Shreveport. Change in position is motion. We have to travel north to go from here to there. Yes? Now, let's keep this complex topic simple. If I'm in anatomical position and I go to fetal position, the road to fetal is flexion. Flexion is the road your joints travel to get you into fetal. That's pretty cool. And that makes sense. That makes sense why the wrist can have flexion, the elbow can have flexion, the cervical, all these different things are working to get you into the same finished position. Flexion gets you into fetal. Not only that, we know the road that it travels. So in this analogy, I'm going from Lafayette to Shreveport. I know what road takes me there. What road takes me there? Interstate 49. Yeah. I know the road that takes me from anatomical to fetal. That's the sagittal road. Think about that for a second. Hey, look out! Ah! You're not gonna go frontal. Heads up! On the golf course, 4. Look out! Oh no! You're gonna take the sagittal road to get you to fetal. Now, Interstate 49 is one road, but there's 2 different directions you could travel, right? You could travel to Shreveport, or you could travel from Shreveport. You can travel away from Lafayette, or you could travel back to Lafayette. And technically, 49 turns into 167, so I mean, you could keep traveling south. But here's the analogy. I love analogies. The sagittal road, but there's 2 different ways I can travel on that road. I can have flexion motion in the sagittal plane to get me more to fetal, and I can have extension motion to get me further away from fetal. Does that make sense? It's practical. This is shoulder flexion. ESPN has lied to you forever. Full extension, maybe of the elbow, but I'm sure that outfield was extended when they were down here waiting for the ball. Think about it. What would get me into fetal position more? Doing this or doing this. I feel like that meme, like teachers, like you're not always going to have your calculator in your pocket, and like you have your cell phone. That meme, my shoulders are flexed because they got me more in the field. Your brains are going to want to see like the elbow and the wrist. But if I'm asking you about the shoulder, tell me about the shoulder. If I'm asking you about the elbow, tell me about the elbow. If I'm asking about the wrist, tell me about the wrist. Now here's where things hopefully are confusing because of what we did at the beginning of class. It would be great if all of our motion was always in everybody's sagittal. That's not how the human body works. So if I start here and I do this, my knee is more in its fetal position. My knee has no idea what the other players on the team are doing. My mom used to get on me and my brother and sister all the time. She'd fuss at me for something. I'd be like, but Jason, it's not about what Jason did. Love you, Mom. So the knee doesn't care if my elbow is still in anatomical. My knee doesn't care if my shoulder is still in anatomical. My knee doesn't care if my wrist is extended. My left knee is like, I am more in the fetal. I am flexed. I had flexion. Yes? We analyze, that was one of your commandments. We analyze position and motion joint by joint. And that's why. Because there's going to be a lot of distractions when you're working with feet. There's going to be a lot of distractions. But when you isolate joint by joint, there's not a lot of distractions. Less distractions. So flexion, who was today years old finding out that flexion gets you in the feet? Cool. Flexion gets you into fetal. Extension gets you further away from fetal. Not linearly, angularly. Give you an example. Shoulder. Flexion, right shoulder flexion, get me more and more in a fetal. Right shoulder extension, get me further away from fetal. And I can continue to rotate. This is further away from fetal position than I was right here. Extension from, this is what we're going to be doing on Friday. We're going to get more introducing you to what we're going to be doing on Friday. We're going to communicate things that you already have been communicating for years. I am north of Lafayette. I am south of Lafayette. I am south of Lafayette, but traveling north. I am north of Lafayette, traveling south. No problems. I am flexed and I am flexing. I am flexed, but I am extending. I am extending and I am extended. I am extended, but I am flexing. Do I expect you to truly understand what that means yet? No, but we're going to work on it. We're going to practice it. We're going to make it make sense. So your first test is going to be the sagittal road. I'm going to specifically tell you the joints you're going to be accountable for. And we're going to have to be able to answer questions like, what's the position of my left knee? I'm going to give you a picture. What's the position of my right hip? I'm going to give you a picture. In fact, let's practice right now. The kind of questions that I'm going to ask you. Watch this. Sound effects. So for those of you watching from home, this is page 16. Page 16. I don't expect you to have a mastery of this stuff yet. We're working on it. We're developing it. But the kind of questions I'm going to ask you on the test is, what's the position of his left hip on the photo on the left? And the answer is his left hip is flexed because his left hip is more into fetal position than it is in anatomical. Does that make sense? What's the position of the right hip? The right hip is in anatomical position. It might look like it's extended, but that's an illusion. That right hip is just as straight as it was when it was right here. Does that make sense? You might ask, what's the position of the shoulders in the photo on the left? And guys, I'm telling you, I'm giving you information. You know, so many times people are like, can you do a review on what's going to be on the test? And it's like, yeah, it's called class. I'm telling you what I'm going to ask you. Some people are going to tell me that the picture on the left, that the shoulders are in anatomical position. Now, that does not mean they are ignorant. That does not mean they are dumb. I didn't finish in the top 10 of my class in Delcom. A lot of people. It's that we haven't got you to the point of understanding how to answer this question. And that's where we need to meet in the middle. You have to come to me. You have to come to Grace if you're having trouble seeing this. Can you guys, hopefully you can back me up. You can see why someone might think those shoulders are in anatomical. Because globally, they're in the same position. The arms are in the same global position. Does everybody understand that? So if you don't understand the difference between global and local, I could totally see why you'd say, well, the arms are in the same position. But we know, hopefully, by now, because we've been developing these concepts, they're not. If Ken was here, and I did Friesrich, and I brought him back up to here, how in the world are those shoulders in anatomical position? Does that make sense? Was blind, but now I see. So what's the position of his shoulders? Are they flexed or extended or in anatomical? Flexed. Outstanding. Now, there's different amounts of being flexed, just like 10 miles north of I-10, 20 miles north of I-10, 30 miles north of I-10, 30 miles north of I-10 is further than 20 miles north of I-10. We have that verbiage in angular world, degrees. I'm flexed 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 30 degrees, 90 degrees. 90 degrees, I'm flexed more than at 45 degrees. It's the same stuff, just applied to angular. When you do goniometry, you're just checking the mileage, angularly instead of linearly. So position, where are you at? On your first test, guys, these are your possible options. I'm giving you your possible options. You can be flexed relative to anatomical. You can be inanatomical. Or you could be extended relative to anatomical. All that means is that you're further away from fetal than you were in anatomical. I'm going to nip this in the bud right here. Hyperextension. Hyperextended. When a child is hyperactive, that means they are active above and beyond. Hypertrophy, above and beyond. Hyperventilation. The word hyper is excessive. So anytime we have the word hyper, it means beyond a normal range of motion. A hyperextended elbow doesn't sound good, right? Because the elbow extended beyond its normal road. That's basically like saying I-10 ends in Jacksonville and you went into the Atlantic Ocean. Your joints have ranges of motion, certain amounts of distance you can move on the road, and there's endpoints to those rows. Some of them end softly, squishing stuff together. Some of them end hard and abrupt, bone smacking on bone. Some end with ligaments. But hyper means beyond normal. My shoulder isn't hurting right here. That's normal motion for my shoulder. So this isn't flexion, extension, hyperextension. That's just extension from anatomical. I think where this gets confusing is most injuries are at the knees, the coming together of the two longest bones. And the knee, the end of its road is anatomical. You can't go beyond it in normal range of motion. So I think what happens is when the knee hyperextends, we want to attribute knee rules to all different parts of the body. But just because my knee doesn't extend from anatomical doesn't mean my shoulder can't, doesn't mean my neck can't, doesn't mean my wrist can't. Does that make sense? So on the test, if I ask you the position of something, all I'm asking you is, where is that joint at? And where are you at? Doesn't matter where are you going. If you're north of Lafayette, it doesn't matter if you're traveling south or traveling north. Your position is, where are you at? I am flexed. I am extended. I am in anatomical. Those are the three answers that you're going to have on your first test. On this picture on the left, still on the same page, the shoulders are flexed. Now again, could we say flexed at 90 degrees? Yeah, we could. But they're flexed. Whether they were 90, 89, 45, they are flexed. They are more into fetal relative to anatomical. Elbows, anatomical, hips, anatomical, everything else anatomical. Hey, how about, I think there's a good one. Let's take a look at his maybe that's not good. No, I think we could say this one. What about his right hip on the photo on the right? So for those of you at home, we are on page 16 in your materials. Bottom right photo where he's up, but his leg is a little back. We cannot look at human motion from the room's perspective, but we can look at it from the bones that make up the joint locally. So I can tell that his femur is behind his pelvis. So 100% I could look at those clues and say, his hip is slightly extended or in an extended position. Extended. Star this, please. And the only reason I'm saying this is because this is where I think we get a lot of confusion. Extended does not mean extension. Flexed does not mean flexion. Does that make sense? And again, use it in things you understand. Being north of Lafayette doesn't mean you're traveling north. You could be passing through Alexandria, coming home, traveling south, but still be north of Lafayette. Position is, where are you at? Motion is, where are you going or how are you moving? Let's do a couple more practices. See if I can find a good one. Listen, I have to try to find a before and after, because that's how I ask a lot of questions. Let's do this. Dyslexia. All right, so let's practice some verbiage. Position of the knees. Where are they at relative to anatomical position? Flexed. Does it make sense? We can't say flexion. More probably she's just holding this position for the photo. So if there's no motion, how can we say there's motion? In addition, what if she was moving and we just had a very high speed camera and she was on her way up when they snapped that photo? See what I'm saying? So we have no idea. She could either be not moving, probably most likely. She could be going down. She could be coming up. We have no idea from one picture, but we do know those knees are flexed. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to teach you in next class how we infer motion. Before and after photos, and there's other ways. Guys, your brains, God, I just think this is so cool. We don't see constant motion. Our brains, y'all know what a flip book is? A flip book is when you take a bunch of still pictures and then you flip it and it looks like it's moving. How many of you saw or remember old school movie reels where they're and you see people moving, but it's actually a bunch of fixed cells? Guys, that's what our brains do. Our brains are basically just taking a bunch of snapshot images and putting them together to create motion. I need us to do similar things. What is my position when you start? What is my position when I finished? Well, if I know those two things, then I know how I had to move. This technique is very important for our field because we won't always have slow motion cameras. We won't always have $20,000 pieces of equipment to be able to slow down. We have our brains and our eyes, and we have to understand there's limits to that. We can only see so many frames per second. That's why magicians are always going to have the upper hand, because they're moving things faster than what we can see. So we have to look for clues. We have to look for clues. Where did I start? That's something I can assess. Where did I finish? That's also something I can assess. I have to move to get there. Let me give you an example. Or one of my favorites. Remember that one, guys? So on the test, I might do something like this, or in class. And you're like, whoa, that happened way too fast. It doesn't matter. Where did I start? My wrist is flexed. It's more in the fetal. Where did I finish? My wrist is extended. It's less in the fetal. I had to have wrist extension to get me from here to there. Now, at the same time I did this, I moved my radial ulnar joint. That's not going to be on your first test. But at the same rate of my wrist extension, I supinated so that it looked like it wasn't moving. So there's going to be a lot of times where our brains can't process that speed, but we can figure it out because we have tools that I'm going to teach you how to figure it out. And again, one of the best things, in my opinion, about this class is you will have those tools for the rest of your life. You're actually going to be getting something for your tuition that you're going to be able to utilize. It's yours. You own it. What's my position of my hips? Flexed. Good. Now again, to avoid confusion, when you're like, well, they're kind of out, flexed, abducted. Guys, I'm not going to ask you about the abduction road. I'm not going to ask you about the frontal road on the first test. It's just sagittal road, and that's why I do it, so that we can unequivocally practice position and motion on one road. And then once we master that, we're going to go play in some other parks and some other fields, and we're going to go explore in the world. That's one. I promise. I'm telling you, this is going to be on the test. Ask if I could find a good picture. Ah, there. Yoink, yoink. What is the problem? Yay, yoink. All right, let's look at the person. So for those of you that are watching and rewatching, I'm going to move the computer to show you the image that we're talking about. I don't know why I just whispered. I think I watched Elf lately. I like to whisper too. Elf and what was? It's a big illusion. A big illusion. Let's analyze her cervical vertebra. Is her cervical vertebra still in fetal, further away from fetal, or closer to fetal? Here's your three choices. Don't answer out loud. I want everybody to give it some thought. Her cervical vertebra is either flexed, extended, or in anatomical. I want you to think about it. And then, if you're willing, I know some of you are shy, I would love for you to share what you think with your neighbor. Because that's how you learn. If you guys get two different answers, then you get a chance to defend your answer. Well, why did you? Oh, I see that. Right now I get it. That's when things get imprinted permanently. Her cervical vertebra is either flexed, extended, or an anatomical. Give it some thought. Talks amongst your neighbor.
Just go straight to the seals. Because there's simply judge that that's it.
I'd love to give you more time, but I'm up against the clock. She is extended. Her cervical vertebra is extended. If her cervical vertebra would still be anatomical, she'd be looking at the ground. She's extended so that her eyes could stay level. The trap is our brains want to make everything about the room. Well, her eyes are level here, and her eyes are level here. Like you're about to break your neck.
Yeah, that's level.
She extended. Shoulders. Are the shoulders flexed, extended, or anatomical? Good. They're still at the side. Still in the same place as they would be in anatomical. What about her hips? Flexed, extended, or anatomical? Flexed. Good. Huh? You get it? Any questions? Are y'all having fun? Don't answer that. Y'all have a good one, guys. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday.